Association. Today we've got with us Dr. Elizabeth Gregory North. She's the head of Ag Communications here at Mississippi State University through our Extension Service. I've worked with Dr. North over the years and a lot of her staff, and they do a great job. Dr. North's expertise is on strategic communications planning, organizational branding, social marketing, advertising, and communications training. She served as a leader, consultant, and trainer for various marketing and branding initiatives within the National Cooperative Extension System, including the National Extension Branding Initiative and National 4-H. She's a member of the Association for Communications Excellence, the Public Relations Society of America, and ACES, the Society for Editing. In 2018, she was elected to the Southern Public Relations Federation Hall of Fame. So I think Dr. North is highly qualified to speak with us today, and she's going to focus today on the importance of branding in our messaging. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. North. If you have questions, use that Q&A feature at the bottom to type in your question, and once we see those pop up, we'll try to ask Dr. North your question as we go. All right, so Dr. North.
Great. Thank you so much, Dean, and thank you, Karen, for making this session work. I really appreciate it. For me, branding is such an important leadership issue, and I really appreciate you all wanting to learn about this and to make it part of your program. And so it's really an honor to be here with you and to present to you. So thank you for being here this afternoon. I'm going to share my screen because I do have some slides. And we will get started. So as I said in my intro, if you read that, and I'll just go ahead and advance to the next one. Oops. I am inspired by Red Steagall, the cowboy poet of Texas. I was in Texas at Texas A&M for 18 years before I moved to Mississippi about 6 years ago. So I really love the Texas culture. And what this poem says about branding is so important, not just for people who work on livestock operations, but for all of us who work for organizations. And this passage from the poem starts with, it's an older cowboy who's giving advice to his younger colleague. And he says, "Son, a man's brand is his own special mark that says, this is mine, leave it alone. You hire out to a man, ride for his brand, and protect it like it was your own." And I think that's such an important way to think about this, is that we are all hired out to the organization that we work for in the land-grant institution, whether it's the university, the college, the extension service, the experiment station. And those are the brands that we need to be responsible to. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the session. But I want you to kind of just get in the branding mindset. And I want to ask you, and we'll use the Q&A box for this, although my slide says chat window, but when I name a brand, I want you to just respond with the first thing that pops into your head, okay? This is just going to be top of mind recall. So here's the first one, Microsoft. So if you can, type in what you would say about Microsoft. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? That's great. We've got a few answers. And let me try one more. These are great responses. Wells Fargo. Do y'all have experience with Wells Fargo? Yeah, marketing nightmare. Yeah, that is a very good one. And then the last one is Domino's Pizza. fast and they'll make it right. Those are great. Those are great. Thank you for sharing all those ideas. I don't know if you can all see the Q&A window, but for Microsoft, we got answers of steady, technology, and quality, which I think are all really good attributes. I would also, for me, I would add the blue screen of death related to Microsoft. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to experience that. It's not fun. Then for Wells Fargo, we got marketing nightmare. And then we got a response of the carriage and horses, which is kind of their logo. And they have recently rebranded, and they're continuing the carriage and horses, but it's just a very different modernized presentation of that visual. So that's very interesting. And then with Domino's, that they're fast and that they will make it right. And so those are messages that are in their advertising. So hang on to those thoughts. Well, and before we leave Domino's, I will add, you might have answered a little bit differently maybe a year or so ago, and you may remember this when, was it when the Domino's, the people who were working overnight in Domino's thought it would be fun to post videos in YouTube of them doing things to the pizza, like spitting on it or whatever. And so that was an example of how one person can make a bad decision that can affect a brand. So we'll talk more about that in just a minute. So now I want to ask you about your brand expertise. And as you can see, these products have had their names hidden to protect the innocent. And so if you could identify any of them, just type it in the Q&A box. If any of them are recognizable to you. Yep, the Green Giant, the front can of asparagus spears. Yeah, the Jolly Green Giant, the Lay's potato chips. Yeah, the Tide laundry detergent. Scroll down and see more. Coca-Cola, yeah. Even without the label on, you can recognize it from the shape of the bottle, which also, interestingly, is a patented trademark for Coca-Cola. Campbell's Soup, yeah. And the hard one is that other can of asparagus, and that is Le Sueur. They use the fleur-de-lis as part of their identity. And then also, it may be hard to tell, but that label is actually a silver paper label with in the background. So that's great. Y'all did a great job on that. So how did you get to be such brand experts? Well, it's because the companies who own these brands are paying attention and they're following the core principles of strong brand communications. That first is clarity, ensuring that their brand name, their identity, their messaging are simple and absolutely crystal clear. Second is consistency. They're using their branding elements the same way every time. Every time you come in contact with that product, every time you see that product, no matter what size it is, no matter what shape it is, they're using those branding elements the same way. And the repetition, they use them all the time, everywhere, on everything they have, all their communications, at every opportunity. So for us in the land grant system, you know, we're not a corporation. We don't have commercial products that we put on a store shelf. What is a brand? And what does it really mean for us? A brand for us, we can look at it in lots of different ways. It can be our reputation, or the values our organization stands for, our mission, our creed. Those of you in Extension are probably familiar with the Extension Professionals Creed from Epsilon Sigma Phi, which is a beautiful statement of the things that we stand for in Extension. But ultimately, it comes down to it's everything that your name evokes in the minds of your customer. It's a promise that you make to them of quality that they will experience over and over again. And it's about that relationship between the organization and the customer. The important thing to note here is that the brand is not what we say it is, it's what our customers believe it is. And sometimes there can be a difference there. This is from Harry Beckwith, who is a he's a wonderful kind of marketing and branding guru, especially for the service industry. And you could say we in education are in a service industry. If you're interested in more from him, please do look him up. He has these wonderful books that are full of just little object lessons that are very vivid and very easy to understand. But he says that you don't choose to have a brand. If you're operating in the public, you have one already. Maybe you think of it as your reputation, but it's a brand, and it's everything that your name evokes in the market, in the mind of your customer. And strong brands lead to strong funding. This is from Kevin Clancy, who was the principal of the Copernicus Marketing and Research organization before he retired. And his group had done studies of organizations, of commercial organizations primarily, over the years, and just piled up lots and lots of empirical research about the strength of the brand image and the performance of the company. And they found that highly admired brands achieved higher levels of financial performance, that they saw that relationship held all the way through. And he says it works for not-for-profit brands as well, that even though they might not have the financial performance in terms of stock market or whatever, that ability to convert those marketing investments into stakeholder donations, into satisfaction with the customers, all those things pay off for nonprofits as well. This study, or this article from the Harvard Business Review, postulates that about 70 to 80% of the market value of a company comes from these intangible assets like brand equity, intellectual capital, and goodwill. Now notice that was from 2007, before the Great Recession. I would say that, and then they go on to say that because of this, organizations are especially vulnerable to anything that damages their reputations. That in the years since the Great Recession, as social media has become so much more powerful and so much more ubiquitous than it was before, I think this is still true, even though our corporate landscape has changed a lot in those years. The ability of a mistake or an error or some blunder to really damage your corporate reputation is even more of an issue now than it was then. This is from Robert Moore, who is with Lippman Hearn, and that's a company, a branding and marketing consultancy that focuses on higher education. And he talks about the goal of any branding program for a university is to make sure that current and prospective stakeholders, whether they're students, whether they're faculty members, whether they are parents, whether they're donors, whatever, that they understand the merit of the institution and the value that it holds for them, specifically for them. And he says the ask is big, that we're asking prospective students to invest 4 years of their lives with us. And I would take that even further to say that we're asking students to invest their future with us, to say that a degree from our institution is going to help them have a successful career, to be able to pay back student loans, all that sort of thing. So that's a huge ask. We're asking parents to entrust their children to us, alums to keep us in their hearts, their minds, and their estate plans. I mean, that's the reality now. And for donors to recognize their own passion, the things that they want to do in the world, in our work, in the programs that we do. But Robert Moore says that it's ultimately worth the effort, that effective branding programs make universities stronger, that they are more able to withstand changing market conditions, they're more ready to take advantage of opportunities as they develop. And here at Mississippi State, there's a lot of discussion going on about the fact that the forecasts for college enrollment are dropping for the traditional on-campus experience. So Mississippi State is really working to build up our online for-credit options for students. And so that strong brand for Mississippi State will help us to expand that online presence in a way that could help us to compensate for the changing market for the on-campus, traditional 4-year on-campus experience. And then this is from Deborah Siemens with Polaris Marketing Research. And I think it's a wonderful summary of the benefits of a strong brand, that Brands are often in the corporate world the only source of unique and sustainable competitive advantage that distinguishes you from other people who are in your same line of business. That your competitors can duplicate your products, they can duplicate your service, they can do it cheaper than you can, but they cannot duplicate your brand and the relationships that it has with customers. As we noted before, that brands lower the cost and risk of doing new things, of branching out into new areas, and that strong brands are a rallying force for employees. It helps them to know they're part of something bigger than just what they're doing in their individual jobs, and it helps them to stay focused, to stay enthusiastic about the company. And it also helps you to attract stronger job applicants. If you have a strong brand, then you're more likely to get better job applicants. For a university, you're more likely to get better students. You're more likely to attract higher quality faculty members, higher quality, more talented staff members with a strong brand. So why then, if branding is so important, why is branding so hard for us? Well, we have several issues. One is that we often are focused on our programs, our processes, our structure, rather than, especially this is a legislative communications example, when they are thinking about jobs, how are we creating jobs? How are we preparing people for jobs? What is our economic impact? What is the value that we're providing? The return on investment? We're talking about our structure. And this is true for any audience and for any communication, that your stakeholders, your customers should not have to understand your structure in order to receive the value that they need from you. And I think that's an important thing for us to learn. Here at Mississippi State, we recently, about 5 years ago, we moved into, for our website, into a content management system. And our website has come a long way in that time, but we still have a little bit too much of our structure is being our dominant message on the website. And so we're about to begin a new digital initiative to really focus on customer experience. And for those of you who are on Lyndall Stout's presentation back in May, she was just here working with us to help us figure out how we can reposition ourselves and regroup for this digital phase. They too at Oklahoma State are doing the same thing. That we're really working on ways that we're to present ourselves on the web that make us more useful to people, that help people more easily find what they need, rather than forcing them to understand how we're set up in terms of departments or programs to receive that value. We also talk about individual programs or projects rather than the overall agency or the overall university. Sometimes we get too deep in the nitty-gritty of our individual work, our individual programs, when people are really not even clear who we work for. So we need to make sure that we're linking those things, that we're linking the overall brand with the individual work that we do. And everybody wants to do their own thing. I mean, this is a natural human tendency, I think. But when we're positioning or lifting up our program or our major or our department at the expense of the overall brand, we're fragmenting that brand presence. When we create our own separate websites from the university or the extension or experiment station website, we're fragmenting that brand. So it's important that we are all pulling in the same direction and supporting the same message. From the outside of the organization, there are two sides of brand perception. And we talked about this just briefly when you were doing your brand impressions earlier. There's brand communications, what you promise. That's what you present through all the communications tools that you have, your website, your brochures, your flyers, your social media posts, whatever. That's brand communications. And then there's brand meaning, and that's what you're delivering, what the consumers, your customers, your students, your extension clients, your partners in research, what they're experiencing. And when the two conflict, customers believe their experience, not what you say, not in your communications. And so we saw some of those that, obviously Wells Fargo doesn't say, come and do business with Wells Fargo because we've done all these bad things in the past and made up fake accounts and charged people more than they needed to and signed people up for insurance programs that they didn't need. That's not stuff that they put in their advertising, but that's what people experienced as customers of Wells Fargo in the past. Wells Fargo, to their credit, has admitted their error there, and they call it reestablishing the bank. They were established back in the 1800s. They're reestablished in 2014 or 2016, whenever it was. So they really are looking at making this new beginning with their brand. And so for that reason, branding is not just a communications activity. It's not just something for your communications staff to take care of. It's not just about putting the logo on everything. It's really important to understand what the brand means to people, and that you align everything in the organization, the policies, the procedures, and the personnel to deliver that brand meaning in every interaction. There's a story from General Motors that happened several years ago that you may remember the Saturn brand of cars from General Motors. And that brand, when it was launched, it was a different kind of car, a different kind of company producing a different kind of car. And they were established the factory was in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and people loved those cars. They were hugely popular, huge brand loyalty there. And in fact, at one point, 30,000 people showed up to eat barbecue in Spring Hill, Tennessee, just to talk about their cars. They went to the factory. After about 10 years of the Saturn brand being out there, it had become the only platform by an American car manufacturer that could compete with the compact cars from Honda, from Toyota, from Nissan. And so it was a very powerful platform for General Motors. But about 10 years in, they kind of needed a new brand. They needed a new car, a new model for Saturn. But GM had a policy that they rotated through all their different car lines, and they took turns getting the investment that it would take to build a new model. Well, that particular year in 1995, it was Oldsmobile's turn. And so the car that was developed was the Oldsmobile Aurora, which tanked. And Oldsmobile didn't even make it to the Great Recession. Oldsmobile was shut down before General Motors went bankrupt in the Great Recession. And so unfortunately, ultimately they lost Saturn as well. And there are brand professionals out there, brand researchers, who talk about that as a mismanagement of the brand, that in that instance, their policies and procedures for the company overrode what the Saturn brand needed and deserved to really take the company into a new direction where it needed to go. So it may not seem intuitive, but it's really true that even deeply internal things like your policies, your operating manuals, all those things can have an effect on how your brand is delivered. But our brand responsibilities from the inside of the organization are 3 elements: the name, making sure we get the name and the logo right, making sure we get the message right, and then finally delivering that brand experience. So if your brand is that you are a friendly campus, then everybody needs to make sure that they're friendly to everybody who visits, every student, everybody who comes on campus. So you need to be able to deliver those experiences in every interaction that you have with the public. And employees who live the brand every day, who are carrying out those experiences, they're strengthening the brand. They're keeping it real, they're keeping it in touch with people, and they embody the brand for everybody they come in contact with. And this is important because even employees who don't have direct contact with external audiences, they are representing the brand internally among the people they work with. They give their colleagues a reason to believe. and they're modeling behavior. They're modeling that brand experience. We often talk about how in extension, if we're doing, say, a handout, or if I'm doing a presentation to extension agents, then anything I do in that presentation is a model that they might follow when they are communicating with the public. And so that's why it's so important that everybody in the organization is on brand. So why does it really matter in the end? Because it's an existential question. If nobody knows who we are, if nobody knows whose programs they benefited from, if nobody knows the value we provide, then nobody participates. Nobody recommends us to their friends, nobody advocates for us, and ultimately nobody funds us. It all adds up. So, what do you need to know as leaders in our organization? These are the key branding questions. To whom is the brand relevant? With whom does it need to have relationships? And what is the goal of those relationships? Who are the target audiences? What are the brand touch points? Where do the target audiences experience the brand? What is the brand's economic engine and who's driving it? And what is the appropriate brand architecture? And we'll get into these questions. So the brand needs to be relevant to all of our different target audiences, to our funding sources, our partners, our donors, students and alumni, prospective students and their parents, clients, potential clients. Without those relationships, we don't have a reason for being. And the touch points are every time they come in contact with an employee, an article in a newspaper, a television show or ad, a football game, something on the radio, they participate in a program, they take a class, all those different ways that they come in contact with us. Those are all brand touch points. Now, this is an important question, and this may be kind of tricky to understand. Your economic engine is the entity where the bulk of your budget resides. Who keeps the lights on, pays your salary, provides the overhead and infrastructure that allows you to do your job. Now, this is going to vary from institution to institution, from state to state. So is it the extension service? Is it the experiment station? Is it the college? Is it the university itself? That's an important question for you to answer. You need to follow the money. And this is why, in extension, a lot of times we want to give a lot of credit to the people who donate to us. And that's great. We want to recognize those people. But if extension is providing the content for a program and the personnel to make that program happen, to manage it, then we can't give all the credit to the organization that buys lunch. It has to be an extension program, and we'll give credit to that sponsor. We're grateful to them, but we can't give all the credit for the program to them. We need to claim that credit for the extension service. So here's the example in Mississippi, because in Mississippi, the extension service has its own line item in the state budget. The extension director is directly accountable to the legislature. And when you look at our budget breakdown, almost 100% of the funding comes to the extension service, not to the university, not to a department, not to 4-H, not to Master Gardeners, not to any of our programs, but to the agency. So the economic engine is the Mississippi State University Extension Service. And the primary economic drivers are state and local elected officials who decide on those appropriations. So I hope that makes sense. If you're teaching, or you're in the experiment station, or you're in the extension service, and your funding comes through the university, then you have your university is your economic engine. And in that case, then you need to think about who that economic driver is. And in most cases, it's going to be the president or whoever makes budget decisions for the university. And that's where you need to be focusing your effort on making sure that they understand the value that your entity is providing. So I hope that helps to make sense to y'all. If you do have questions, please do ask them in the Q&A box. Ultimately, what it comes down to is that no land-grant university or agency, extension, or experiment station has unlimited funds to build identity and recognition for a huge number of brands. So we have to focus on the one brand that has the most impact on the viability of the organization. So that's why we need to always lead with the identity that represents the economic engine. So let's talk about brand architecture. Brand architecture is just a way to manage multiple brands within the same organization so that they're handled well, that the marketplace, the customers are not confused, and that the organization achieves its strategic goals overall. So you might think about different corporations that you're familiar with. We talked about General Motors earlier. So General Motors would be the parent brand. Then a division brand might be Chevrolet. Then a product campaign might be about the Suburban or the Silverado pickup truck or the Impala. In this case, their promotion strategy really focuses on the division brand and the product campaigns, because General Motors is not advertising a lot just about themselves. They want you to know which dealership to go to, the Chevrolet dealership, and which product to buy, the Silverado pickup truck or the Impala. Now, on the other hand, Microsoft, for example, we know the parent brand, Microsoft, and we assume that there are divisions in Microsoft, that there's a division that works on the operating system, there's a division that works on software, but really we don't know much about them, do we? What we know are the products. We know Windows, we know the Office suite, we know Word, we know PowerPoint. So they focus more on the parent brand and the products and don't worry so much about the divisions. And so this is the promotion strategy that I would suggest that we need to focus on, that we need to lead with these, I'm calling it brown, but it's kind of reddish looking now as I look at it big on my monitor, the economic engine. Whatever it is for your particular institution, for you need to focus on that. And then the gold brands down here, we need to keep them strong because those are the client touch points. That's where the clients experience our brand. Okay. Let me see, was there? Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So it's about the funding. It's about that brown economic engine is the one that represents the source for appropriations, for grants, for fundraising. And it gives a strong marketing identification that we're able to hang things on this big brand that has multiple people working for it. All of our colleagues are supporting that same brand. So what can we do about it specifically? Wear your brand every day. Make sure that you include the economic engine. Display it in your office, in common areas, in your building, wherever you can. Add the messaging too. If you have a slogan, make sure that you're carrying forward not just the logo, not just the name, but also the messaging. Be ready with your elevator pitch. You never know when you might have an opportunity to talk to someone who might be interested in participating in a program, who might be interested in coming to the university as a student to be part of a particular major, who might be interested in supporting a research program. If you don't have an elevator pitch, work with your communication staff at your university or with your AgCom staff to develop something that you can use. At Mississippi State Extension, what we use is our brand promise, which comes from the National Extension Branding Initiative. So I'll do my elevator pitch for you really quickly. I'm Elizabeth Gregory North, and I work for the Mississippi State University Extension Service. Extension provides practical education you can trust that helps people, businesses, and communities solve problems, develop skills, and build a better future. We're about extending knowledge and changing lives. So that's my brief elevator pitch. And then I would go into a specific program after that if this person that I'm talking to is depending on their interests. So what that was constructed of was just my name, the economic engine name, and then that brand promise, and then the slogan at the end. So you can construct something like this for yourself, but your communication staff may already have something that you can use. Be sure that you're promoting the brand in publications, handouts, social media, news articles, whatever. Even if you're doing something that is going to be a handout for an in-service training that you're doing for extension people, if you're doing something that is for your academic peers, be sure that you're putting the appropriate brand on it. Don't put just your program brand. Always include the economic engine as well. And deliver high quality brand experiences in every interaction. This is one of the things from Harry Beckwith. He says that every act is a marketing act. Everything you do in public has implications for your brand, for your messaging. It affects your brand either positively or negatively. And so it's important for all of us to recognize that responsibility and work to protect the integrity of our brand. I'm sorry, my voice is breaking up. Warren Buffett talks about, he says it takes 20 years to build a reputation, but only 5 minutes to ruin it. And we've seen that happen for some of the brands that we've talked about, that they have lost huge amounts of market value, they've lost customers, they've had to invest huge amounts of money to be able to pull out of that, to be able to rebrand or rebuild their brands. So keeping that in mind, knowing that it does take years. For our institutions, it's been more than 100 years that we've built these reputations of trust. And it's important for all of us to realize our responsibility to make sure that trust is kept, that we're maintaining that quality of brand experience. And pay attention to the nitty-gritty stuff too. Include the economic engine in your email signature. I don't know how many times I get emails from somebody with just their job title and their phone number or their email address, and I don't know where they're from. I don't really know who they are. Be sure that you include the economic engine in your email signature. Include the economic engine in your outgoing voicemail message, because you never know who's going to be calling you. Include the economic engine when you answer the phone. Make sure that you have business cards, letterhead, and envelopes that are properly branded, and use them. Carry your business cards with you. Make sure you have them on you when you might have an opportunity to distribute them. If you have a name badge, wear that. If you have branded clothing, wear those. Make sure that you're using every opportunity you have to communicate the brand. And then here at the end, I want to go back to Red Steagall. Because the young cowboy is speaking now, and he says, but I got to thinking about what he had said, and the more of it I understand, the more I believe. We'd all be better off if more people would ride for the brand. Ultimately, everything we do to keep the brand strong, to keep those brand experiences powerful and trustworthy, benefits all of our colleagues now and in the future. Building brands is for the long term. We've had a long run in the land-grant university system of more than a century, but we can't rest on what we did in the past. We have to keep carrying our brands forward, making them relevant to new audiences, to new experiences, to new people. And we all need to focus on maintaining the integrity of that brand. So thank you all very much. That's the end of what I wanted to share with you. I appreciate your attention and your participation, and I'm glad to take any questions that you might have.
So if you have any questions, you can use that question and answer feature to ask those now. And if Dr. North can't see those, then we can ask those to her. I guess I had a question for you, Dr. North. So you've worked with various rebranding initiatives for different organizations. How often should an organization review or check their branding to see, do we need to do something different to reach out to our audience better?
That's a great question, Dean. There are a couple of different ways that I would like to answer that. First is you need to pay attention to your brand all the time. attention to the brand and attention to those messages, attention to those experiences is a constant in your organization. Secondly, as I said, building a brand is for the long term. Marketing campaigns can be short term. They can be a few months, they could be a year. For your brand, you do want to give your brand and your messaging time to develop in the marketplace, time to get recognition, time to reach people. So I would say, every maybe 5 years or so, it's a good idea to look back on your messaging and see what you need to freshen up. I would say it's rare that you need to make a totally new brand, create a totally new brand. And I have to say that I did that in Texas. In fact, I did it twice. When I first went to Texas, the name of the extension service was the Texas Agricultural Extension Service. And and that was in 1993. And as we went on through the 90s, we had a serious problem with our family and consumer sciences programs and even 4-H, with people not understanding why an agricultural agency would be doing those programs. And as Texas became more urbanized, it became more of a crisis. As we had redistricting in the legislature, more and more of our legislators were living in the Then several years passed, and we had a new vice chancellor for agriculture, and they wanted to create a brand that would unify all the elements of the agriculture division of the system, because we were also in Texas. And so that's when the AgriLife brand was developed. An external consultant came up with it. And then I was in charge of the implementation and the training for all of our employees. And so in that case, we were, it was a huge change for us. And we really tried to do it right. We did it from top to bottom thoroughly. We trained every employee all over the state, all 1,400 employees of Extension, and we did all the experiment station employees. And so everybody had all new materials, they had all new messaging, they had all new things. We taught them all how to do their own elevator pitches, all that work. And so that level of change is something that I would hope would happen maybe once every 20 years. I mean, you really need to, it takes a huge amount of investment on the part of the organization. It's money, it's time, it's employee effort. In redirecting things like that. And so it's not something to be undertaken lightly or just on a whim, or just because, oh, I'm tired of that old thing, let's have a new name and a new brand now. So I hope that answers the question, Dean. It's a great question. Let's see, I see another question from Nancy.
Before you do your stop share so they can see you.
Oh, yes.
Speaking, and then please continue.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So let's see. Nancy says, have I come across something unique that an extension program has implemented related to branding and or marketing? Let's see, something unique. I think that there are a number of things that are going on out there that are really very powerful. I think that what a lot of extension services are doing, because again, I work for the extension service, so I'm paying more attention to those groups online. What they're doing in terms of social marketing or social media is really very interesting. Making sure that, and what we do here in Mississippi is we have a social media strategist, and we encourage our faculty members, our programs to have say Facebook accounts, and we have a number of Facebook accounts in Mississippi. Every county office has a Facebook account. Our major extension programs have Facebook accounts. And we encourage those people to post, pictures of what's going on, the real things that are happening at their events. And then we can reshare. So we're getting a lot more activity, a lot more engagement by resharing things throughout Extension, rather than if Extension had just had one account for everybody. So on a social media platform, generally speaking, the more accounts you have and the more you can share and reshare across those accounts, the more engagement you get. And so I think that has kind of opened up a new avenue for us in terms of branding Extension. And it's helping us to reach people in a really micro way. I mean, to get really focused in on what the minutia of what they're interested in. It's also given us an opportunity to measure things more accurately than we've been able to do before. We've done media monitoring with our mass media, but it's hard to get radio statistics. It's hard to get television statistics. So we just haven't had a good way to evaluate those efforts. But on the web and social media, we can know who we're reaching, who's seeing those messages, who's responding to them, what they're saying, and we can have a dialogue with them. So I think that things that are going on related to social media are very interesting. I think also the other thing that's happening is that, and y'all are probably aware of this if you're working in FCS, that the SNAP Ed program or the SNAP program has made social marketing funding available to people in doing SNAP Ed. So they are allowing funding for advertising. And a number of states, we here in Mississippi, but also I know of campaigns in Alabama and Louisiana and Florida that I'm most familiar with, because we meet, regionally in the southern region and talk about these things, have been very powerful, and they are extending the Extension brand. All of those instances styles, but we're making sure that people know it's coming from Extension. So I hope those are good examples for you. And let's see, Nancy asks also, what sorts of things are you doing with Mississippi State website that are shifts in branding, focusing less on structure on the website? We're in the process of going to WordPress for our website in Tennessee. And the funds are from, they're from SNAP Ed, from the SNAP program, the USDA program. We in Mississippi are using it with our SNAP Ed campaign. We're also using it with FNEP. And because we've developed not only the advertising, but also educational materials, and some of those have been funded through FNEP funding as well. So we're making those available through both our SNAP Ed program assistants and our FNEP program assistants, or nutrition educators, I'm sorry. Let's see, the Mississippi State website. Let's see, I wonder, can I show y'all the Mississippi State website real quick? Let's see, share my screen again. And let's see. I don't know if I can. I don't think I can get to the website for y'all to see it real quickly. But if you go to extension.msstate.edu, extension.msstate.edu, you can see what we're doing now. And we have at the top, we have client pictures and testimonial quotes at the top of our website. And then we do have the kind of the normal navigation that kind of divides things up by subject matter, but we base that navigation on search terms that we had from our old website. We were able to look at the terms that people were putting into our search window. And so we use those terms rather than like department names. So we have things like, instead of animal and dairy sciences, we have like animals or livestock are our headings, or instead of horticulture, we say lawn and garden, something like that. So that's kind of where we are right now, which I view as kind of an intermediate step. Where we want to be is something like Penn State's website, where you go, it's extension.psu.edu. And you get basically, it looks kind of like Google, but with a nice picture behind it. It's just a search box. So it's all about making sure that the client gets the information that they're looking for, rather than forcing them to navigate through our structure to find it. And let's see, Kathy's asking about the 4-H brand, and thank you for bringing that up, because that is such an important thing to consider. I mean, we all know that 4-H has more than 100 years of experience, and for the 30 years that I've been working in Extension, National 4-H Council has been doing research into the 4-H brand and its brand recognition. And the last information I saw was that the 4-H Clover still had about 70% recognition among the adult population of the United States. I mean, that's up there with Ronald McDonald, and Mickey Mouse, practically. So really, that's the best thing we've got going in terms of branding and marketing in Extension. And so for us in Mississippi, and we did this in Texas, and I strongly recommend it for everybody. And I don't want to say that we're the only ones who are doing it. I know a lot of other extension services are doing this, that 4-H is the only program that can co-brand with Extension. So that means that whenever they appear together, they're the same size, they're in the same kind of positions of dominant identity or ownership of whatever that document is, or the whatever. I know that in Illinois, a few years ago, they even had the 4-H Clover on the Extension County office signs, along with the Extension logo. So it's important that we are leveraging the power of the 4-H brand, but that we're also linking it to the Extension brand, because we know that no matter how well known 4-H is, if Extension doesn't exist, 4-H is not going to exist either. And so we need to make sure that those brands are linked in our states. But don't neglect the 4-H brand. Make sure that it's there, but always make sure you have the Extension brand too. And of course, that would vary depending on, if you're doing a T-shirt or a pin, or or a cap for a 4-H, or obviously you're not going to have room to put the Extension logo on there too. But for documents, especially for legislative materials or materials for parents, making sure that they know that 4-H is coming from the Extension service is key. Also, when you're doing after-school programs or school enrichment programs for 4-H, make sure those kids know that it's coming from 4-H. We've had in Mississippi, some kids that have participated in some of our camps or some of our programs that are all, they're hyped on the subject. They loved it. They had a great time, but they didn't know that it was 4-H. So we're still working on building that 4-H recognition among some youth audiences to make sure that they know that this value is coming from 4-H. That's a great question. Thank you for that.
Well, I don't see any more questions in the Q&A box, and we're about at our hour limit. So Dr. North was gracious enough to share her slides with me in a PDF format. So once I get a list of participants, we can send those out to you. So if there are any notes that you were trying to take, you can go back and revisit those in her slides. And we'll try to get those posted on the Lead 21 alumni page as well with a copy of this presentation. So if you have any more questions later on, I'm sure you can email Dr. North, reach out to her or give her a call. I know she'll be glad to help you and answer your questions. And with that, thank you for participating, and thank you, Dr. North, for giving us a great presentation on branding.
Well, thank you. Thank you all so much for the participation, for being here, for the great questions, the great comments. And I apologize for not putting my email address, but Dean has that. He knows how to get in touch with me. So if you do want to reach out to me, please do. So thank you all so much.
Thanks again to everybody, and have an early happy Thanksgiving, and be safe over the holiday season. Thank you.